Hi everyone. This week's literacy lesson deals with writing in the margins. So this is a strategy that we encourage readers to use to really make sure that they're interacting with the text. A fancy way of saying this is annotation. The document that I have pulled up right here can be found under the must do section of the lessons for this week. So what you see right here is a summary of 6 different annotation strategies that you can use while you are interacting with the text. So I won't read all of these to you because you can take a look at them on your own, but I wanted to point out a couple of my favorites. So one thing that I do encourage students to do is summarize. So after you've read through a section, sometimes it's really helpful at the end to just add a note in the text that explains what the main ideas were. Another thing that I really encourage students to do is connect. If you can make connections to your own life while you're reading things you've already learned about, knowledge you already have, this scaffolding is really going to help you understand what you're reading better. It's going to help you remember what you're reading after you walk away from the text. And it's a really good way for you to slow down and make sure that you're absorbing all of that information. The final one I wanted to point out is the one down here that says question. This is really helpful because if you go through and as you're reading, write down questions that pop into your head. Maybe it's questions that you have where you want something clarified. Maybe it's a question where you don't understand what they're talking about at that point. Anything that you can do to keep track of those questions is excellent because then maybe by the end of the reading, some of them will have been answered, and maybe by the end of the reading, you're still going to have questions. Then it's an excellent opportunity for you to take those questions that you still have and bring them to the live e-session for the week, or send them to me in an email if they're things that you really need help with. Now, a lot of times, college students are encouraged to do this, but they buy their books, right? So they can write, they can highlight, they can do all that stuff. High school students in a face-to-face setting oftentimes will be given a whole bunch of Post-it notes to put all over the pages of their textbook where they do these things. Well, how do we do that in our online environment with our digital textbook? Well, I'm going to show you that real quick. So you can see right here I have chapter 6 open in the textbook. And if I were to go to page 1 here of the chapter, to section 1, you can see that I have highlighted something right here already. So let's say I was reading this introduction about the history and government of the United States, creating a nation, and it said immigration is a recurring theme. So what I do, first of all, let me show you how to highlight text. So all you need to do is put your cursor where you want it. You need to click and hold while you drag. Okay, 2/5 of North America, right? You are then able to pick a color. So let's say I made this one blue. You are then able to add a note. So this is where you can type a question, you can make a connection, right? You can do those things that we were talking about. You can summarize information, and then you would just click. So let's say this is a test, and I'm going to save and close. Because I'm logged in as me to the textbook, any highlighting that I do, any notes that I add are automatically saved. Now, if I want to see what the notes are that I have, I can just click on what I highlighted, and you can see my test text pops up here. I said immigration is a recurring theme. Maybe my note would be my great-grandparents came from India, right? So that's a connection to my personal life. If I go to the next page, and let's say I was reading about the Columbian Exchange, I'm looking at this graphic up here and I'm seeing what foods were native to the New World that did not exist in Europe prior to the Columbian Exchange, right? So let's say I'm looking at that, I get to this, the arrival of Europeans in the Western Hemisphere affected the lives of both Europeans and the native peoples. So I had an aha moment while I was reading that, right? So I made a note. It says, interesting, Italian food did not contain tomatoes prior to the exchange. So I think about all the Italian food that I've eaten with tomato-based sauces, and I'm thinking that wasn't always the way Italian food was, right? So until you have, the 1600s, basically, you don't get the Italian food that we know and maybe most of us love today. And then maybe I went down here, right? And you can color code because you don't get a ton of color options, obviously, but you can do some color coding if you find that helpful. So let's say I'm down here and I'm reading about the Louisiana Purchase. So then I go and maybe my questions are going to be in red. And my question is, why would France sell such a big tract of land? Right? And maybe I'll answer that as I continue reading. Maybe it won't be answered and I want to come to the e-session with that question, or I want to email the teacher to get that question answered, or I want to remind myself to maybe Google it later, that kind of thing. So you can always see your notes just by clicking on them in the text. You'll notice up here, you also have a tool button, okay, that says notes. When I click on this, all the notes that I have taken for this section or for this unit appear here, right? So I can scroll down and see all of my notes. I can see the highlighted text and I can see what I wrote. The color coding remains. And if I want to go back and see on the page one of my notes, I just click View on Page and it jumps automatically to that page. Now you may notice that right now this view is pretty zoomed out. If you don't know how to do that and you want to be able, I kind of like being able to see the whole page at once, which is why I zoomed out like this. So all you have to do is go to the More tool right here, and you can see that I zoomed out to 50%. I can zoom in farther, right? Sometimes the bigger text is much easier on our eyes. And then when I want to close this panel, I just click again, right? So now I'm zoomed in a little bit more. I can still do my notes, right? That still comes up. It automatically shrinks this a little bit when I open this panel. So basically, that is how you go about writing in the margins or doing this annotation in your online text for human geography. I hope you found this helpful. I hope that you actively do that this week as you're reading, and just let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.